They were never meant to fall in love. She challenged his power, he threatened her peace. But when the stakes turned personal, nothing stayed professional. Before we dive into the story, comment below where you're watching from. Enjoy the story, everyone. Miranda Sankert was rushing breathlessly through the hallways of the luxurious Sablewood Grand Hotel in downtown Chicago, clutching the hem of her pale mauve dress and trying not to twist her ankle in heels that had seemed like a charming idea earlier, but now felt like pure sabotage. The plan was simple: arrive early, help with setup, and shine as the bridesmaid of honor. But fate had clearly planned a different script. Everything had gone wrong from the moment she left home. First, the rideshare app crashed. Then a delivery truck almost clipped her as she stepped out of the car at the hotel entrance. And, of course, the elevator to the ballroom was full, forcing her into a stair-run marathon. If there were a medal for most chaotic wedding entrance, she'd win it without competition. "Sorry, excuse me, sorry," she muttered while dodging startled guests and near collisions. She was so close. Miranda could already hear the soft buzz of conversation coming from the ballroom. The ceremony was about to begin. And then it happened. Wham! Miranda smacked into something solid or someone. The collision sent her bouquet flying, her clutch skidding across the marble floor, and her body pitching forward like a slow-motion disaster. But before she could crash fully into the elegant carpeting, firm hands gripped her waist, holding her upright. The scent of something dark and expensive filled her senses, and for a moment, she forgot how to breathe. "Please tell me I didn't just flatten an elderly man," she muttered under her breath, attempting to regain her balance without completely losing her dignity. "I'm definitely not an elderly man." The voice was deep, smooth, and unhurried. Miranda blinked a few times before daring to look up at the man still holding her by the waist. Her breath caught in her throat. What kind of absurd genetic miracle was this? The man looked like he'd stepped out of a GQ magazine spread. Charcoal hair perfectly styled, steel blue eyes that held both mischief and command, and the quiet air of someone used to giving orders and having them followed. His expression was equal parts curiosity and amusement. "You're late." Miranda's eyes widened. "Great, observant and smug." "Thank you, Captain Obvious." "Any other brilliant observations?" One corner of his mouth twitched upward. But Miranda didn't have time for charming strangers, or their eyes that could melt concrete. She tried to pull away quickly, only to feel a sharp tug on her dress. She glanced down. Fantastic. The fabric had hooked itself around her own heel. Of course, because falling wasn't embarrassing enough, I had to trap myself too. Without a word, the man crouched down, unhooked the fabric with swift precision, and stood again. "You may now proceed with your near-death mission." "I was already on my way," she snapped, gathering her things. Before she could make a clean getaway, he added, "I hope you have health insurance. At this rate, you won't survive the hors d'oeuvres." Miranda rolled her eyes and took off again without glancing back. But even as she slipped into position among the bridesmaids, his voice echoed in her head. "Don't look at him. Don't look at him," Miranda chanted silently, eyes fixed forward. The ceremony had begun. The bride, her best friend Natalie Reeve, was already halfway down the aisle and shooting her a daggered glare that could rival a Bond villain. Miranda couldn't concentrate on anything except the man seated among the groomsmen, the very same man she'd crashed into moments ago. He was right there, still watching her, his gaze just as sharp and unreadable as before. "Who is that?" she whispered to the bridesmaid beside her. "That's Colton Maddox. And why should I know who he is?" Her friend blinked at her, stunned. "Because he's one of the wealthiest men in the U.S. CEO of Maddox and Keene, a global financial advisory group." Miranda stared ahead, trying to process that information. Of course, totally normal that a billionaire spends his Saturday catching bridesmaids before they faceplant on five-star carpeting. Her friend barely stifled a laugh. "He's a mystery," she added. "Cold, calculated, never seen with anyone. They say he can end someone's career with a two-word email." Miranda's stomach sank. Awesome. Not only had she crashed into him, but she'd also been borderline rude. She shut her eyes briefly, inhaled deeply, and gave herself a mental pep talk. The wedding was happening. She just needed to survive the next hour, avoid another public disaster, and most importantly, stop looking at Colton Maddox. But when she opened her eyes, he was still watching her. And this time he raised a single brow as if he could hear her thoughts and found them amusing. A chill ran down her spine. Something told her that night was far from over. Miranda wasn't easily intimidated. She'd worked in high-stakes architectural meetings, dealt with clients who thought they knew everything. But now, seated among the bridesmaids trying to focus on Natalie's vows, she felt the heavy weight of that stare. Colton Maddox. She didn't need to look to know he was still watching her. Because somehow he was the only thing in the entire ballroom that refused to blur into the background. "You've been twirling your hair for 5 minutes," the bridesmaid beside her whispered, nudging her gently. Miranda froze mid-motion, instantly dropping her hand. "Have I?" "Yes. And guess what? He's still staring." Miranda sighed, trying to ignore the warmth creeping up her cheeks. "Why would a billionaire CEO stare at me? I'm just an architect who nearly tackled him in a hotel hallway." Her friend shrugged. "Maybe he likes a challenge." Miranda forced her attention back to the ceremony just in time to hear Natalie finish her vows. Guests around them let out sentimental sighs and dabbed at their eyes. The wedding reception was in full swing soon after. The sablewood grand ballroom shimmered under golden lighting, soft music playing as guests mingled among elegantly decorated tables. Waitstaff floated past with silver trays full of champagne flutes and hors d'oeuvres. Miranda stayed busy, checking on Natalie, ensuring the bride had everything she needed and doing her best to avoid more humiliating moments. But the universe had other plans. Again, she reached for a glass of wine from a passing tray but turned too quickly, right into something firm. The glass slipped. Red liquid arched midair like a dramatic scene from a movie. And then it landed dead center on a crisp black suit. Time froze. Miranda stared, horrified at the spreading burgundy stain on the suit's jacket. Her gaze rose slowly, only to meet the unmistakable blue eyes of Colton Maddox. "Tell me this didn't just happen," she whispered, still holding the now empty glass like it was Exhibit A in a crime scene. Colton glanced down at his now stained shirt, then back up at her, his face unreadable. "Well, it did." Miranda's mouth went dry. "I'll get a napkin." "No, wait, I can clean a." Before she could spiral further into panic, Colton calmly removed his jacket and rolled up his sleeves with casual precision. "Relax. It's just wine." She blinked. "You're not going to sue me or have me escorted out?" A hint of a smile tugged at his mouth. "Not yet. But if you'd like to make it up to me," he paused, eyes narrowing slightly, "join me at the bar." Miranda stared at him. Was that a real invitation? More like a calculated attempt, he added, as if reading her thoughts. "That depends on my answer," she replied, feeling her voice finally return. He tilted his head toward the bar. "Surprise me." The ballroom's bar, tucked near the far corner beneath an arch of twinkling lights, was far quieter than the rest of the reception. Only a few guests lingered near the polished counter, making the space feel surprisingly intimate. Miranda slid onto one of the tall stools and crossed her arms, trying not to look intrigued. "I should order something absurdly expensive, just to see how you react." Colton raised an eyebrow. "You think the price of a drink would rattle me? That's exactly why it would be fun." He let out a low chuckle and a small shiver trailed down her spine. Colton Maddox laughing. Apparently that was a rare event and somehow she triggered it. The bartender approached and Miranda placed her order without hesitation. 2 shots of whiskey. Colton arched a brow. "Impressive." She shrugged lightly. "Did you expect me to ask for a sparkling rose with edible flowers?" "I think you like surprising people." The bartender returned with the drinks, and Miranda picked up her glass, turning it slowly in her hand. "So, Colton Maddox," she began with a faint smirk, "why is a famously private CEO attending a wedding that doesn't exactly match his reserved vibe?" He swirled the amber liquid in his glass before answering. "Because I'm the groom's best man. And because your social calendar is full of corporate galas and investment summits?" Colton laughed again, deeper this time, and Miranda felt a strange flutter in her chest. "Something like that," he said. "But what about you? I'm the maid of honor, here purely out of loyalty, not preference." "And yet," he said, leaning slightly closer, "you seem to be enjoying yourself." She took a sip of whiskey, feeling it burn slightly before spreading warmth through her. "Well, things certainly got more interesting after I spilled wine on the guest of honor and nearly flattened him in the hallway." Colton raised his glass in mock salute. "A memorable first impression." Miranda rolled her eyes. "You're never going to let that go, are you?" "Probably not." They slipped into a moment of quiet, but it wasn't awkward. It was the kind of silence that carried weight. unspoken thoughts lingering between them, charged with something new. Miranda looked away first, pretending to examine the label on the whiskey bottle. "So," she said slowly, "do you always look at people like that?" "Like what?" "Like you're dissecting their every move." Colton smirked. "Only when I think they're worth figuring out." Miranda's heart stumbled. What was this? Some kind of slow-burn mind game? She took a breath and downed the rest of her whiskey in one confident gulp. This was fun. But I should get back to the bride. Colton didn't argue. He simply watched her rise from the stool, his gaze following her like gravity. "See you around, Miranda." She paused for half a heartbeat, then looked over her shoulder with a small smile. "See you around, Mr. Maddox." She returned to the bridesmaid's table, heart still hammering from that conversation. The wedding buzzed with energy, laughter, clinking glasses, dancing, but something inside her had shifted. Clara's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "I saw you two talking at the bar." Miranda rolled her eyes. It was just polite conversation. Clara gave her a knowing smirk. "That man couldn't take his eyes off you during the ceremony, and now he's still doing it from across the room." Miranda took a long sip of champagne, trying to sound casual. "You're exaggerating. He's just observant." "Observant?" Clara laughed. "That man's a shark in a designer suit, and yet he keeps circling you like he's curious." Miranda looked down at her glass. "He's probably just bored." Clara tilted her head. "Miranda, he's Colton Maddox. If he's interested, it's because he sees something different." Miranda shrugged, trying to shake off the heat in her face. "I'm just a regular architect. There's no reason someone like him would pay attention to someone like me." Clara leaned closer. "You're smarter than that. You just don't want to believe it." Before Miranda could respond, a groomsman appeared to whisk Clara away for a dance, leaving her alone again, or so she thought. "Are you going to keep pretending we haven't been staring at each other all night?" Miranda closed her eyes for a second before turning around slowly. Colton stood there too close for comfort and even closer for sanity. "I wasn't staring," she said quickly. Colton tilted his head with amusement. "You're a terrible liar." She crossed her arms. "Do you always sneak up on people like that?" "I'm more interested in how people react. And so far, you've been interesting." Miranda narrowed her eyes. "Good for you. Now if you'll excuse me." But Colton reached out gently, his fingers brushing her wrist just enough to make her pause. "Dance with me." Her eyes widened. "What?" "One dance. That's all." Miranda looked at the dance floor, then back at him. "And what if I say no?" "I'd say you're lying again." She bit her lip to suppress the smile threatening to break free. "You're unbearably arrogant, you know that?" Colton took a small step back and extended his hand. "And yet here you are." Miranda hesitated only a second longer, then placed her hand in his. As he led her to the dance floor, the world seemed to soften around them. The noise faded, the crowd blurred, and all she could focus on was the quiet assurance of his touch. His hand settled at her waist with practiced ease, the other wrapping around hers as if they'd done this before. "You've done this before," Miranda said, trying to keep her voice light. "Dance?" "A few times. But not like this?" He looked down at her with a flicker of something softer in his gaze. "No, not like this." Miranda looked up, meeting his eyes fully. And for the first time that night, she let herself hold the moment. Because deep down, she knew something was unfolding. And despite all the reasons to resist it, she didn't want to look away. The ballroom faded, but the feeling between them only grew clearer with every step. She hadn't realized how much she enjoyed dancing until now. Or maybe it was just the way Colton seemed to know exactly how to guide her, how to keep the space between them just close enough to feel electric. "You look surprised," his voice murmured near her ear, sending another chill down her spine. "Should I be? You didn't expect me to know how to dance." Miranda narrowed her eyes slightly. "No, I didn't. But I suppose it makes sense. You probably learned to dance like you learned everything else, because it's expected of someone like you." Colton smirked, his eyes gleaming. "Are you always this blunt?" "Only when I'm intrigued." "Then tell me, Miranda, what else intrigues you?" She opened her mouth to respond, but his gaze distracted her again. The intensity in his expression, the way he studied her, made her forget her own name for a second. "That's not fair." "What isn't?" "You looking at me like that and expecting me to think straight." He laughed quietly. "I'm not responsible for your distractions." She pulled away slightly, intending to step back and break the moment, but Colton caught her hand. "Running already?" Miranda raised an eyebrow. "I don't run." "Then prove it." She crossed her arms. "How?" He hesitated for a second. "Have coffee with me. Tomorrow." Miranda blinked. The idea was tempting. Way too tempting. Luckily for her, the music ended right then. She gave him a faint smile and let her hand slip from his. Colton didn't protest. He just watched her go with that maddening, unreadable smile on his lips. The reception was winding down. Guests were heading out offering last hugs and congratulations. Miranda decided it was time to leave too. The night had been long and unexpectedly intense. She made her way through the quiet lobby of the Sablewood Grand, pulling out her phone to order a ride. No drivers available, the app informed her cheerfully. Of course. She was debating whether to wait or call Clara for a ride when a familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. Looks like your getaway plan hit a snag. Miranda turned slowly. Colton was standing a few feet away, hands casually tucked into his pockets, the ever-present glint of challenge in his eyes. I'm not escaping. I'm heading home. Without a ride? He glanced at her phone screen. That seems inefficient. She crossed her arms. I'll figure something out. You could let me drive you. Miranda blinked. Excuse me. I'm offering you a ride. It's late. Standing alone outside a hotel at night? Not the safest choice. I can take care of myself. I have no doubt. He took a step closer. But I'm already leaving. Might as well share the road. She bit the inside of her cheek, hesitating. Getting into a car with Colton Maddox was a terrible idea. An idea that came with consequences. But her app still displayed the same unhelpful message. Fine, she said at last. Only because I have no better option. Colton didn't gloat. He simply walked ahead and opened the passenger door for her without a word. Miranda settled into the car, clasping her hands tightly in her lap as the doors shut with a soft click. As Colton pulled out onto the quiet downtown streets, a heavy silence fell between them, though it didn't feel hostile. It felt loaded. She stole a glance at him. He looked perfectly at ease, focused on the road, the glow of the dashboard reflecting off his profile. Do you always drive yourself? She asked finally. At night, yes. It clears my head. Oh, so you do have thoughts. A small smile played on his lips. You assume I don't? I assume you're the type who thinks 10 steps ahead, but never lets anyone see it. His eyes flicked toward her. Not a bad read. She turned to the window, feeling a strange tightness in her chest. You're intimidating. Everything about you screams control and calculation. And that bothers you? Miranda was quiet for a moment. Maybe. Colton didn't respond right away. Then, in a voice softer than she expected, he said, You have no idea the effect you have on people. Miranda turned to him sharply. What's that supposed to mean? He didn't answer, just smiled slightly, his fingers relaxed on the wheel. You talk like I'm the only enigma in the room, but Miranda, you pull people in. You just don't notice it. Miranda looked away, unsure whether to feel flattered or completely thrown off. It was just a casual comment, or maybe it wasn't. The car stopped at a red light, and Colton turned his head slightly to look at her. You feel uneasy around me because you think I'm trying to analyze you. Her breath caught. But the truth is, he continued, I just want to understand what it is about you that makes you so impossible to ignore. She opened her mouth to respond but found nothing coherent to say. The rest of the drive to her apartment passed in silence, but not the awkward kind. It was quiet in a way that felt like both of them were thinking too much and saying too little. When the car finally stopped outside her building, Miranda let out a slow breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Thanks for the ride. Colton tilted his head, his gaze meeting hers in that same unshakable way. It was my pleasure, Miranda. She hesitated, fingers wrapped around the door handle. Something in his voice had made her chest tighten. She stepped out of the car and closed the door gently behind her. As she climbed the steps to the building, she paused halfway up and looked back. He was still there, watching. Miranda quickly turned away and stepped inside. The elevator doors closed and she leaned against the wall, heart pounding. What just happened? The next morning, Miranda walked into the office of Horizon Design Group, balancing a paper cup of strong black coffee and a folder of floor plans. After a whirlwind weekend and one very unexpected car ride, she was determined to lock her thoughts back into work mode. She hadn't expected to see Colton Maddox again. That one night at the wedding had felt like a strange collision of worlds that didn't belong together. He was a high-powered CEO. She was a 31-year-old architect barely staying afloat between deadlines and city permits. But when she stepped into the conference room for the morning meeting, her heart nearly stopped. Colton was already there, sitting at the head of the table. reading over blueprints like he belonged there. Miranda froze in the doorway. And then he looked up. Their eyes locked for a second too long. "Miss Sankert," he said with a calm nod as if nothing about the situation was remotely unusual. She blinked. Did he just pretend this was normal? Oliver, the firm's director, cleared his throat. "Miranda, this is Colton Maddox, our new lead investor for the Silverpine Tower project." Her stomach flipped. "Excuse me?" She turned toward Oliver in disbelief. "What?" Oliver smiled, clearly unaware of the internal earthquake happening in her chest. "Mr. Maddox and his firm have just acquired a significant stake in the project's funding. He'll be involved in strategic development moving forward." Miranda glanced at her colleagues. No one else looked remotely surprised. Just her. Colton said nothing. He simply watched her, calm, unreadable, impossible. She forced herself to smile. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Maddox." "Thank you," he said smoothly. But his eyes told a different story. After the meeting ended, Miranda didn't wait. She bolted for the hallway, needing space, air, logic, anything. But, of course, Colton caught up to her just outside the conference room. "Miranda." She turned slowly, arms crossed. "What is it?" Colton stood with relaxed confidence, suit flawless, expression unreadable. "No friendly hello?" She narrowed her eyes. "Are you my boss now?" "Not exactly. But we'll be working together." Her voice tightened. "Did you know I was on this project?" Colton gave a subtle shrug. "The second I saw your name on the file. And you didn't think that might be complicated?" "I thought it would be interesting." Miranda let out a bitter laugh. "So this is a game to you?" "I think fate has a better sense of humor than either of us." She crossed her arms tighter. "Or maybe you just like pulling strings." Colton's smile grew faint. "You're giving me too much credit, Miranda." Miranda wasn't sure if she wanted to scream or just throw her coffee at him. But one thing was certain, there was no avoiding this anymore. The office of Horizon Design Group buzzed softly with the sound of fingers tapping on keyboards and pages flipping, but inside the project meeting room, tension had its own seat at the table. Miranda sat at one end, papers in front of her, pretending to read. Colton Maddox sat across the room, completely relaxed, like this was just another Tuesday. They would be working together for the next several months on Silverpine Tower, and he seemed disturbingly pleased about it. "Do you always frown like that when you're focused?" he asked casually. She didn't even look up. "Do you always interrupt when people are trying to get things done?" Colton leaned forward slightly, smirking. "Only when I'm curious." Miranda finally looked at him, eyes narrowed. "And why would you want to understand me?" "Because you intrigue me." Her heart did a strange flip. Before she could come up with a proper comeback, he added, "Let's get dinner." She blinked. "What? Dinner?" "We need to review the latest design proposals, and it'll be more productive than sitting here until midnight." "So it's not a date, just a clever way to make me work overtime?" He smiled, and it made her stomach tighten. "If that's what helps you accept it." Miranda sighed. "Fine. But I get to pick the restaurant." Colton's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "Deal." The place Miranda chose was nothing like the high-end restaurants Colton probably frequented. Rosie's Diner, a cozy corner spot tucked between a laundromat and a vintage bookstore in Lincoln Park, had chipped booths, handwritten chalkboard menus, and the best late-night grilled cheese in town. "You really brought me here?" Colton asked, glancing around with mild surprise. "I'm a woman of simple tastes, Mr. Maddox." He chuckled, picking up a laminated menu. "And you think a CEO like me doesn't enjoy simplicity?" "I think CEOs like you usually eat things with foam and 12-syllable ingredients." "You're not wrong. But it's good to try new things." She arched a brow. "If you say that after trying the chili fries, I might believe you." As they ordered, Miranda noticed he seemed more at ease than he ever did in the office or at the wedding. The tension between them hadn't disappeared, but there was a different rhythm to it now. "So," he asked as their food arrived, "why architecture?" She looked at him, then down at her plate. "What do you mean? Was it always the dream?" Miranda shrugged. "Since I was a kid, I liked reimagining spaces. Making things feel different. Architecture gives me that power to shape how people live, move, feel." Colton nodded slowly, as if truly absorbing every word. "And have you?" She smiled, remembering. "There was this woman. Wanted to remodel her home for her grandson who was paralyzed in a car accident. We redesigned the entire house to make it accessible. When she saw it finished, she cried. Said it would change his life." Colton didn't speak right away. Then he said simply, "That's admirable." Miranda laughed softly. "Don't say things like that, Mr. Maddox. I'm more used to you challenging everything I do. Maybe I like seeing you flustered." She rolled her eyes. "You're impossible. And yet you're still here." Their food arrived just in time to cut the moment short. Miranda focused intently on her fries, doing her best to ignore the fact that he wasn't wrong. She was still there and enjoying it far more than she wanted to admit. Later, as they stepped outside into the crisp night air, the streets of Chicago felt calm and empty. "Are you tired?" Colton asked. "Not really. But if you're about to suggest going back to the office, I'll fake sleep right here on the sidewalk." He laughed, and she was pretty sure that was the third time she'd seen him genuinely laugh, which made it both rare and dangerous. "No, not the office. Just a walk." Miranda gave him a sideways look. Colton Maddox taking a walk with no agenda? Shocking. "You said trying new things is good, remember?" She couldn't argue. So they walked slowly through the quiet streets, talking about everything and nothing. And somewhere between the neon diner sign and the soft rhythm of their footsteps, Miranda saw something different in him. Something vulnerable. "Have you always been like this?" she asked quietly. "Like what?" "Reserved. Distant." He thought for a moment. "Life taught me to be careful. Doesn't mean I don't feel things." The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. Silence settled between them again, warm and full of things left unsaid. And for the first time, Miranda didn't see the powerful CEO. She saw the man behind him. And that scared her. Because it was real. Miranda woke up the next morning with her mind tangled in memories. The dinner. The quiet walk. The way Colton had looked at her, not like a challenge to be solved, but like a question he wanted to answer slowly. It wasn't supposed to feel this real. She jumped out of bed, determined to push it all away with routine. With blueprints. With structural loads and client emails. Anything but him. But the second she walked into Horizon's conference room, her plans unraveled. Colton was already there, seated at the table like he owned it, which, to be fair, he partially did now. He didn't glance up right away. When he did, his gaze held hers a second longer than it needed to. Miranda forced her tone to be neutral. "Good morning." Colton gave her a small, unreadable smile. "Morning, Miranda. Sleep well." She narrowed her eyes slightly. He knew exactly what he was doing. Perfectly, she lied. The team filed in one by one and the meeting began. She buried herself in the details, materials sourcing, budget updates, mechanical systems, anything to avoid acknowledging the man watching her like he could still hear the things she didn't say the night before. But no matter how hard she tried to stay focused, every time she looked up, she found him watching. And every time her pulse betrayed her. The meeting ran long. By the end of it, Miranda was exhausted from pretending everything was fine. As she gathered her notes and stood, Colton's voice stopped her. "Miranda." She turned slowly, schooling her features into calm professionalism. "Yes." Colton closed his folder and rose from his seat. "I need to go over a few design decisions with you." She sighed. "Now?" He nodded. "We can talk on the balcony." Miranda followed him out onto the office's wraparound balcony. A quiet space overlooking the downtown skyline. Morning sun glinted off the high-rises, but the air between them was thick. She leaned on the railing, crossing her arms. "What exactly do you want to talk about?" Colton looked at her for a moment before answering. "Last night." Her spine stiffened. "We're supposed to be talking about the project." "We will," he said calmly. "But first, last night." Miranda looked away. "It was dinner. We talked. It's not a big deal." "Are you sure?" She opened her mouth, but the words wouldn't come. He took a step closer. "You're pulling away on purpose." Her jaw clenched. "This isn't about you." "It is," he said quietly. Miranda turned toward him, tension in every line of her body. "Why do you always think everything's about you?" Colton stepped closer, closing the distance with unsettling ease. "Because I know this pattern," he said. "I've done it myself. Keep distance. Build walls. Pretend it doesn't mean anything." Her pulse pounded. "This doesn't mean anything." "Then look me in the eye," he said gently, "and tell me you didn't feel anything last night." She stared at him, heart racing. She wanted to say it. She wanted to end this. But the words wouldn't come. Colton stood in silence, giving her time. But the truth was, she didn't have the strength to lie. Instead, she stepped back. "This doesn't matter," she whispered. "I have work to do." She turned and walked away before he could say another word. But with every step she took, the pressure in her chest grew heavier. She had tried so hard to stay rational. Professional. Untouched. But the truth was following her like a shadow. She could lie to him. She could lie to her colleagues. But she couldn't lie to herself anymore. And Colton Maddox knew it. At the end of the day, Miranda slipped into the office kitchen for a glass of water, trying to buy herself a moment before heading home. She leaned against the counter, eyes closed, exhaling slowly. Then she felt it. That familiar, charged presence beside her. "You're avoiding me again," Colton said quietly. She didn't even pretend to be surprised. "I'm not avoiding you," she said, keeping her eyes on the sink. "I'm trying to work without distractions." "So I'm a distraction now?" "You always have been." The words slipped out before she could stop them. She cursed herself silently. Colton gave a slow, satisfied smile. "Finally." "Finally what?" she snapped. "You're admitting it." She turned to him, arms crossing. "I'm not admitting anything. You just did." He stepped closer. The air between them changed, warmer, heavier. "Miranda, you can keep pretending this isn't happening, but we both know it is." She shook her head. "You want to know what's happening?" "I'm trying to keep things simple. Focused. You've got time for everything except admitting how you feel." She swallowed, the truth pressing hard against her ribs. "This can't happen." "Why not?" Her eyes met his. "Because we work together." Colton's smile was slow, but it held something dangerous beneath it. "And what if we didn't?" Miranda held her breath. He stepped closer, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel him. "Tell me something," he said, voice low. "If I weren't your investor, if there weren't rules and reputations to protect, what would you do?" Miranda couldn't speak. Because she already knew the answer. And the problem was, so did he. The silence between them grew dense with everything unspoken. Then Miranda stepped back. "I have to go." Colton didn't follow her. He just watched. And as she walked away, her heart thudding like a warning, she knew nothing was the same anymore. The next day at the office, she kept her head down, pretending she hadn't nearly crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. But it was getting harder, because the feelings were already there. And Colton Maddox wasn't the kind of man who backed down. It was close to midnight by the time Miranda closed her laptop. She'd been reviewing blueprints, trying to exhaust herself into not thinking. She took a quick shower, collapsed onto the couch, and closed her eyes. Her phone vibrated. She reached for it, expecting a system notification. But her chest tightened when she saw the name Colton Maddox. Her thumb hovered. "Colton, I need to talk to you. It's important." Miranda stared at the screen. "Miranda, is this about the project?" "Colton, no." Her throat went dry. She hesitated, then typed back, "Then it can wait until tomorrow." She locked the phone, dropped it onto the table, and leaned her head back, exhaling hard. But she already knew this wasn't over. And she was right. The next morning at the office, Colton didn't speak to her. But he didn't have to. His gaze said everything. During the meeting, he challenged her ideas, questioned her proposals, pushed harder than usual. By the end of it, she was fuming. And she wasn't going to let it go this time. As soon as the conference room cleared out, Miranda walked straight over to Colton, fire in her step. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice tight. Colton didn't flinch. He simply closed his folder and nodded. "Of course." They stepped into an empty meeting room. Miranda shut the door behind them, then crossed her arms. "What was that in there?" Colton leaned back against the edge of the table, calm as ever. "What was what?" "The constant provocation during the meeting. Are you trying to push me to my limit?" He tilted his head slightly, studying her. "And if I am?" She glared. "Then I'm asking you to stop." Colton took a step forward, closing the gap. "You know what I want, Miranda." She felt her pulse jump. "This can't happen." "Why not?" "Because it's messy. It's risky. We work together, eh?" "It's life," he interrupted softly. "Everything meaningful is messy." She took a step back. "Brian, this is reckless." Then he said something she didn't expect. Something that knocked the breath right out of her. "I'm leaving the project." Miranda froze. "What?" "I'm transferring my shares in Silver Pine Tower to another investor." Her heart dropped. "You can't just walk away from a multi-million-dollar deal. "I can. And I am." He looked directly at her. "Because now there's no reason left for you to keep running." She stared at him, stunned. "You're serious?" "As a heart attack," he said calmly. "This is insane. You can't just throw that kind of money away." "I didn't. I shifted it. There's a difference. Why would you even do that?" He stepped forward again, eyes locked with hers. "Because I can do a lot of things, Miranda. And what I want, what I choose, is you." She shook her head slowly, unable to believe what she was hearing. "This doesn't make sense. None of this makes sense." "It doesn't have to. It just has to feel real." "And it does." Miranda's voice dropped. "I need time." Colton nodded once. "Take it. But think carefully." She left the room in a daze, her heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear her own thoughts. Colton Maddox had just walked away from a major investment because of her. His words echoed in her head like a song she couldn't silence. "What I want is you." She didn't speak to anyone. She gathered her things, walked out of the building, and kept walking. For nearly an hour, she wandered the city without any clear destination, ending up in a quiet, tucked-away cafe called Juneberry and Pine. She ordered the strongest coffee on the menu and sat by the window staring at the street. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just thought. Miranda had never been the type to lose control. She'd built her life on logic, planning, and clean lines, both in her work and in her heart. And then Colton Maddox happened. He challenged her. He cracked her armor. And now he'd done the one thing she never saw coming. He removed the excuse. What if I weren't your investor? What would you do? She gripped her coffee tighter. She knew the answer. But admitting it? That was the hard part. By the time she got home, it was past 11. The apartment was dark. She dropped her bag on the couch and sank down beside it, letting out a breath that felt like it came from deep in her chest. Her phone buzzed again. Colton Maddox. This time, it wasn't a message. It was a call. Her heart leapt. She stared at the screen for 3 long seconds. Then answered. Miranda. His voice was steady, calm, familiar in a way that disarmed her. What is it, Colton? She asked, trying to keep her tone neutral. We need to talk. We've talked enough. Not about this. I can't do this right now. Then tell me when. She said nothing. He paused, then added, I'll see you tomorrow, Miranda. Good night. The line went dead before she could respond. She stared at her phone long after the call ended, her breath uneven. And in that moment, Miranda understood something terrifying. She didn't want to keep running. She wanted to see him. The next day started like any other, or at least she tried to make it seem that way. She buried herself in meetings, emails, sketches. But by late afternoon, her nerves were fraying. Because she knew Colton wouldn't let things stay unresolved. And he never did anything halfway. At exactly 6 o'clock, she gathered her things, ready to make her escape before anything dramatic could happen. But as soon as she stepped outside Horizon's office building, there he was. Leaning against his car in a perfectly tailored navy coat, his gaze already locked on her. You're really going to pretend you didn't see me? He asked, not moving. Miranda exhaled, heart pounding. What do you want, Colton? He walked over, calm and certain. Get in. I'm not But she stopped herself. She didn't want to argue. She just didn't want to admit that she wanted to go. So, in silence, she got in. They drove without speaking. She knew exactly where he was taking her. The Maddox penthouse with its skyline views and unsettling familiarity. And for the first time, she didn't resist. His penthouse was as she remembered, sleek, refined, and cold in that modern way. But tonight, something about it felt different. Maybe it was her. Colton removed his coat, unbuttoned the top of his shirt, and poured 2 glasses of red wine. He handed one to her, and Miranda accepted it, sipping without a word. Then she looked at him, standing just a few feet away. Why am I here? She asked finally. Colton met her eyes without hesitation. Because you didn't want to run. Her throat tightened. And what if this goes wrong? He stepped closer. And what if it goes right? Every instinct screamed at her to leave, to escape the gravity of this moment. But she couldn't. She didn't want to. When Colton reached out, cupped her face in his hands, and kissed her, it wasn't gentle. It was everything she feared and everything she craved. The kiss was deep, sure, full of the kind of want that burned through hesitation. She pressed into him, hands clutching his shoulders as if they were the only thing keeping her upright. But just as fast, reality came crashing in. Miranda broke away, heart racing. I can't. Colton stood still, his expression unreadable. He didn't look surprised. Why? He asked quietly. Miranda ran a hand through her hair. Because it's crazy. He took a step back but didn't break eye contact. Give me one real reason. She struggled to form a sentence. If I say yes, what happens next? Colton crossed his arms, calm but firm. Then we figure it out. Together. She let out a humorless laugh. Just like that. Yes. Just like that. Her chest ached. I can't, Colton. He nodded slowly. I won't force you, Miranda. But stop pretending it's not real. She froze. The silence stretched between them, heavy, full of everything neither could say. Then, without another word, she turned and walked toward the door. And didn't look back. The following days were the hardest she'd faced in years. She avoided him at work, kept her head down, stayed late to avoid running into him. Colton didn't push, but he also didn't hide the fact that he was waiting. Every glance between them held tension so thick it felt impossible to breathe. And Miranda knew this wasn't over. Not even close. It was late. The office building was nearly empty when Miranda finally packed up her things. She'd been reviewing elevation revisions and lost track of time. As she turned the corner toward the parking garage exit, she stopped. Colton was there, leaning against his car again like he had known she'd come this way. Like he had been waiting. Miranda froze. She considered turning around, walking away, pretending she hadn't seen him. But deep down, she was tired. Tired of pretending. She took a slow breath and walked toward him. "Are you waiting for me?" she asked. Colton raised an eyebrow. "What do you think?" Miranda shook her head. "You're relentless. Get in the car. And if I say no, you won't." She hated how right he was. So she got in. He drove in silence like he had before. She didn't ask where they were going because she already knew. Back to his penthouse. Back to the one place where nothing felt safe. But everything felt real. The elevator doors opened into the top floor. The penthouse was dimly lit, the skyline glowing outside the massive glass windows. Colton slipped off his coat, loosened his tie, and turned to her. "Miranda." She looked up at him, this time not retreating, not dodging. "Say it," he said softly. Her lips parted, hesitant. "What do you want?" he asked again, stepping closer. His voice was low, patient, but heavy with something deeper. Miranda didn't answer right away, because she already knew. She'd known for a long time. "I want you," she said finally. Colton's smile was slow, steady. "Then stop running." She didn't respond. She didn't need to. When he reached out and took her hand, she let him. And when he pulled her toward him, she didn't resist. Not this time. They crossed the line they'd danced around for far too long. And for the first time, it didn't feel like a mistake. It felt like surrender. Morning light filtered in through floor-to-ceiling windows. Miranda blinked against the brightness, taking a moment to remember where she was. Soft sheets, the faint scent of cedar and expensive cologne. And Colton, still asleep beside her, one arm draped lazily around her waist. He looked calm, completely at ease. Unlike her. Miranda sat up slowly, pulling the blanket around herself. What had she done? She reached for her clothes, moving carefully to avoid waking him. But just as she slipped on her blouse, his voice broke the silence. "Running away again?" Miranda froze. She turned, and there he was, propped on one elbow, tousled hair, that maddening smirk on his lips. "I'm not running," she muttered. "Then why are you sneaking out?" "I just needed a moment to think." Colton sat up slightly. "Miranda." She hesitated. "Don't say it unless you mean it," she whispered. He reached out and offered his hand. She stared at it, one simple gesture that carried 1,000 unsaid things. Then, before she could talk herself out of it, she placed her hand in his. Colton pulled her back into the bed, holding her gently. "Do you regret it?" he asked quietly. Miranda looked up at him. "No." His smile was soft and real. "Good." He pressed a kiss to her forehead, then wrapped his arms around her again. And for once, Miranda let herself rest. Colton's smile didn't fade. Then stop overthinking. She wanted to, but her mind was still a maze of questions. "What now?" she whispered. Colton traced a light line across her cheek with his finger. "Now we see where this leads." Miranda met his eyes. And for the first time, she saw it clearly. He was just as deep in this as she was. And that was the scariest part. In the days that followed, they fell into a rhythm that was never defined, never discussed, but completely understood. At work, everything stayed professional. No looks, no touches, no tells. But in private, when the meetings ended and the lights dimmed, they were drawn to each other like gravity. The tension only grew. Every stolen glance across the conference table. Every late-night text. Every excuse to stay just a little longer. And soon it wasn't enough. Miranda was at her desk reviewing interior spec updates for Silver Pine Tower when her phone buzzed. "Colton, come to my office." She frowned. No subject. No context. But she went. And the moment she stepped inside and closed the door, she knew this wasn't about work. Colton stood near the window, his back to her, hands in his pockets. The city stretched behind him, bathed in afternoon light. "Close the door?" he asked, without turning around. Miranda did. Slowly. He turned. And everything about his face told her this wasn't another flirtation. "We need to talk." She felt her pulse rise. "About what?" He took a slow step toward her. "About us." Her breath caught. "What about us?" It's becoming more serious than I expected." Her heart twisted. "And that's a problem?" He didn't answer right away. And that silence said everything. Miranda stepped back like she'd been slapped. "So you want to end it?" Colton ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "I don't know." She gave a sharp laugh. You don't know. His eyes met hers. They were conflicted. Miranda, I've never been the kind of man who feels anything, she finished for him. Silence. Then she shook her head. You shouldn't have started something you weren't prepared to finish. He didn't argue. And that hurt more than any words ever could. Colton's jaw clenched like he wanted to protest but couldn't. Miranda let out a quiet, bitter breath. If you're telling me this now, it's because the decision's already made. Still, he said nothing. So she did the only thing she knew how to do, walk away. All right, she said, her voice stronger than she felt. Colton blinked. Miranda. No. She raised a hand. You don't have to explain. I get it. She left before he could respond. And she didn't go home. Instead, she walked. Through the city, past glowing storefronts and busy intersections. Past everything. Her heart ached in a way that felt too big for her chest. She had fallen for him. Deeply. And now she had to move on alone. Because Colton Maddox might have cracked open something real in her. But he wasn't ready to live in it. That night, Miranda didn't sleep. She sent a short message to HR asking for a day off. Then she turned off her phone. And for the first time in months, she didn't want to be found. On the second day of Miranda's absence, Colton knew he had made a mistake. He hadn't slept the night before. He kept replaying everything in his mind, every word, every silence between them. I'm not the kind of man who gets involved. But he had. He was. And it scared him more than anything else ever had. By late afternoon, Miranda heard her doorbell ring. She frowned. She wasn't expecting anyone. When she opened the door, her breath caught. Colton stood there. Coat collar turned up, eyes dark and tired. I don't want to talk, she said instantly. He didn't move. But I need to. There's nothing left to say. There is. You just haven't let me say it. She crossed her arms, jaw tight. You made yourself perfectly clear. Colton stepped forward, his voice quieter now. I was wrong. She tried not to flinch. Yes. You were. His eyes searched hers, genuine now, open in a way she hadn't seen before. I've spent most of my life avoiding emotions. Controlling outcomes? And then you showed up. She blinked. What does that have to do with anything? Everything, he said. Because you changed all of it. Miranda opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. I thought if I ended it first, I could protect myself, Colton said. But the truth is, it was already too late. Her heart was thudding so loudly, she could barely hear. And then he stepped forward, cupped her face in his hands, and whispered something she never imagined she'd hear. I'm in love with you. Her breath caught. What? I'm in love with you, Miranda. And I don't care how messy it gets. I'm already all in. Tears stung at her eyes, but she blinked them away. You don't mean that, she whispered. I do. She looked up at him and realized he wasn't afraid anymore. He wasn't hiding behind logic or walls or business deals. He was just him, and that was the most terrifying and beautiful thing in the world. Miranda took his hands. Then stop running, Colton. He didn't answer. He just kissed her. And this time, neither of them pulled away. The kiss wasn't like the others. This one was final. Certain. It was a promise. Colton held her like she was the only thing anchoring him to earth. And Miranda let herself fall. Completely. When they finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I'm not letting you go, he whispered. She smiled through the tears still clinging to her lashes. Good. Because I'm not going anywhere. The months that followed were the happiest of her life. They worked side by side on Silver Pine Tower, still arguing in meetings, still exchanging late-night texts about HVAC systems and window specs. But the tension between them had changed. It wasn't unspoken anymore. It had turned into something real. Something they built together. At night, they shared quiet dinners. Long walks. And loved so much of it. Colton Maddox, once untouchable, learned to be human with her. And Miranda, once guarded, let herself be fully seen. But he knew something was still missing. And he had a plan. The restaurant was elegant, intimate, and quiet. Colton had reserved the entire rooftop terrace at the Emberline, a Michelin star spot overlooking the river. Fairy lights glowed softly above them, candles flickered between white roses on the table. Miranda wore a navy silk dress that moved with the breeze. Her heart had been racing since they arrived. You're quiet, she said with a teasing smile. Colton looked nervous for the first time in months. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, he said. Then he stood. And before she could process what was happening, he dropped to one knee. Miranda's world stopped. The lights, the city, the sounds, all of it disappeared. Colton opened a small velvet box with a ring that sparkled like starlight. Miranda Sankert, he began, voice steady but full of feeling. I never planned for this. I never planned to fall for someone who would dismantle my carefully built world with one glance. Her eyes filled with tears. But then you came in, late to a wedding, chaotic, stubborn, brilliant, and I've never been the same since. She covered her mouth. I love you. And I want to spend the rest of my life learning every version of you. So, will you marry me? A laugh broke through her tears. Yes, she whispered. Yes, 1,000 times yes. The guests rose as soft piano music filled the Rosewood Conservatory, a historic glass-ceilinged venue nestled just outside Chicago. Miranda stood at the edge of the aisle, heart pounding beneath her white lace gown. She hadn't thought she'd ever do this. Not with someone like Colton Maddox. But here she was. And there he was, waiting at the altar in a perfectly tailored tux, his eyes on her like nothing else existed. She walked slowly, each step filled with joy and disbelief. When she reached him, Colton took her hand and whispered, You look like the rest of my life. She smiled, breath-catching. The officiant began the vows. Colton Maddox, do you take Miranda Sankert to be your wife, promising to love her, honor her, and stand by her side all the days of your life? Colton's voice was soft but steady. With everything I am, yes. Then it was her turn. Miranda Sankert, do you take Colton Maddox to be your husband, promising to love him, honor him, and stand by his side all the days of your life? She looked up at him and smiled through the tears. Yes. Forever, yes. They didn't wait for permission. Colton pulled her in and kissed her like it was the only thing that ever mattered. The guests erupted in cheers. The reception was magical. Twinkling lights, laughter, dancing. Miranda spun through the night in Colton's arms, her heart full. They were surrounded by the people who had seen them grow, from cautious glances to stolen kisses to a love that transformed them both. Later, as the crowd thinned and the music softened, they stood at the edge of the dance floor. Colton touched her cheek gently. You changed everything, Miranda. She leaned into him. So did you. The night ended under a sky full of stars, their hands intertwined. Not every love story begins with perfection. Sometimes it starts with a crash in a hallway. A spilled glass of wine. A stubborn architect and a guarded CEO. But the best ones? They begin when two people stop running and choose each other. Every day. From this day forward,